Right now I'm still seeing 9 towns, so I'll give people a couple more minutes and then maybe what we should do is to get the presentation started if we can't meet a quorum. And then Bonnie, if we do later meet a quorum, we can go back and do
How,
the one vote that we have. The one vote that we have is just the meeting minutes.
how many do you need?
14.
14.
13. I thought it was 12. 13. Okay, we're pretty short. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's 6:04. We'll give people a couple more minutes. We know Grafton's not coming. We know there's a lot of pre-town meeting conflicts with tonight. So, and everybody has asked about it, and we've let everybody know that if they couldn't be here, it will be recorded so they can watch it on their own time.
Stanley's at the beach. Nice.
Mhm.
On the shores of the West River.
So I'll give people one more minute, and then I think we should move forward at 6:05. And then if we do eventually end up with quorum, we can call the meeting to order. We just have the one vote on the meeting minutes tonight, so nothing urgent. All right, it's 6:05, so I'm just gonna move my chair's report up to the front of the non-meeting that we're having. But I wanted to let everybody know that just to remind people, if you haven't already seen up, as part of our follow-up from our last meeting, which had to do with Act 181, we have put together, we being staff at WRC, has put together a public meeting specifically related to the items that came up during, as concerns during our last full commission meeting, relating to road rules and Tier 3. And if you haven't seen the announcement, it's at March 17th at 6 p.m. Hopefully everybody received the announcement, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. The only other thing I have under my chair's report is a heads up that Steve Lemke in particular from Guilford, along with staff, is revising our commissioner handbook and job description, as well as the rules of procedure. We took a look at the executive board level at the first draft. At our February meeting, we'll have a second draft, sort of time to review at our March meeting, and then we're expecting to bring the rules of procedure to the board at our next meeting. The next full board meeting is in April. So just want to give people a heads up. That's what's going on at the executive board. With that, we still have 9 towns, so I'm just going to turn the program over to you, Chris, to introduce our guests for tonight. And then again, I have a hard stop at 6:30. Bonnie's going to take over, and if we do reach quorum later in the evening, Bonnie, you can call the one vote.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Camille, do you want to introduce the project and your students, or do you want me to turn it over to Seth and Julia, or what's your preference?
I can just say a few words and turn it over to them. Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us come to the meeting tonight. I'm with a sick toddler, so I will not turn on my video. But we worked with Chris and Windham Regional over the past semester to prepare a 4-town flood resilience project. And Julia and Seth are 2 of the students who worked with me on that project, and they are continuing to work with me and with Chris this semester, and they are going to present the deliverables that we created, walk you through the process we used, and talk about how all of these tools are adaptable for all of you.
And I'll just note they were fantastic. The class was fantastic to work with. Camille and other faculty at UMass were great to work with, and students were incredibly innovative. And one of the things you're going to see that they created is basically a climate or flood adaptation board game to play in your town. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Camille and Chris. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're excited to share a little bit more with you guys. I'm going to share my screen now so we can jump right into the presentation.
Hey, can I just ask that you introduce yourselves to us so we know who you are? Thank you
Absolutely.
for being here.
I'm gonna do it right away. So
Oh,
don't
okay.
worry.
I didn't mean to jump
I'll
the
do it
gun.
now. I am Julia Opal, and then I'll let my lovely colleague introduce himself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Price. I am a second year master's student here at the Masters of Regional Planning program. Also, of course, in the graduate planning studio, which is what brings me here today.
Yeah.
And Camille is their faculty, their professor in scenario planning at the UMass Amherst Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning program.
Here, yeah. I also I can switch to the slide that shows all of our other lovely colleagues from last semester. I'm also a regional planning graduate student, and I'm also doing a degree in sustainability. Yeah, so we are the Deerfield River Valley Rise, or Resilience in Shifting Environments. And we had the opportunity to work with WRC over the last 6 months. And we were working on flood resiliency in the towns of Dover, Reedsboro, Whitingham, and Wilmington to help them develop a comprehensive flood resilience plan. And sort of the crux of our work last semester and continuing on this semester between me and Seth has been grappling with the question of what does it mean to live with water? So the goal was not only to understand current flood risk, but to explore how uncertainties like population change, funding constraints, climate impacts, and economic pressures might shape the future of these communities, and to think more broadly about Vermont as a whole. So major flood events, which I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with, like Hurricane Irene in 2011, pictured on this slide, and the July floods of 2023 and 2024 have drastically upended these four communities and Vermont, while the cascading streams and riverside towns of the Deerfield Valley contribute so much to the region's character and pride. They also represent one of the largest vulnerabilities in the area's future. So our mission, which has guided every step and continues to inform the work me and Seth are doing now, is to help these four towns adapt to climate change and mitigate flood risk by creating equitable and lasting tools that connect public concern and meaningful analysis. This means grounding our recommendations in local knowledge and regional data and in a real understanding of how residents experience flooding today and how it could change in the future. We wanted to build something that recognized the uniqueness of each town while still identifying opportunities where working together regionally can make everyone more resilient. And with that mission in mind, we quickly realized that to understand flood risk, we had to also understand how uncertainty more generally might shape the future of these communities. In short, understanding the context of these towns' current state was imperative to creating lasting solutions. So through our engagement efforts, we found universal challenges to resilience, and Seth is going to just talk briefly about some of the things that we learned through that.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So just speaking on some of the universal challenges that we saw across all of the communities and really many of the communities of Southern Vermont, was that a lot of these communities hold little space to take on bold plans that demand a large administrative effort. As the quote on the slide right now reflects, vacant town positions, tight budgets, and long to-do lists on pretty tight timelines were a common thread that was shared with us by town administrators and stakeholders in the public time and time again. In recognition of these towns' limited capacity, we really wanted to propose recommendations that streamlined decisions according to best practice and local context, and overall increase the capacity for each of these four towns. Moving on to one of the other challenges that we were consistently seeing, many public assets in these towns, like roads, bridges, culverts, emergency services, utilities, town centers, could go on, are really overexposed to flooding. Beyond environmental exposure, flood risk is worsened by economic forces. The current state of increasingly, as an example, the current state of increasingly unaffordable and aging housing in Windham County is a perfect representation of flooding's cascading impacts, as the graph in the bottom right corner of the slide illustrates. To reiterate what we heard from one town administrator, when a single culvert takes up to 10 years to replace, and there's hundreds in each town alone, it is essential that these communities have a very clear means of prioritizing action and making decisions. And lastly, underpinning many of the dilemmas facing these communities is financial uncertainty. As the graph in the lower left-hand corner of this slide shows, many of these towns are experiencing aging populations at a clip that is well above both the state of Vermont's rate and the United States as a whole. And as the pie chart shows, there is a very shared sentiment that younger people don't feel able to build a successful life in Vermont. All of this contributes to a shrinking workforce and tax base, strained essential services, reduced community investment, and limited financial resources at the end of the day. And speaking of financial resources, flood resilience at the municipal scale has historically really depended on whether towns can access disaster relief funding. Vermont and its towns have historically relied on federal dollars for mitigation efforts, emergency response, and long-term recovery. As the graph on your screen shows, the amount of federal disaster aid Vermont received in 2024 was equivalent to 90% of their reserve fund. If that federal funding had been unavailable, Vermont essentially would have to shell out all of their reserve fund just to recover from that single disaster in 2024. And unfortunately, as we look towards the future, the availability of federal funding has become increasingly uncertain. As the headlines on this slide show, since January of 2025, the Trump administration has drastically restructured the Federal Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as FEMA, as many of us know it as. This has drastically shifted federal funding, has drastically restructured federal funding, and has contributed to a network of driving forces that impact flood resilience in Vermont.
Yeah, so with that context, we're just going to move and talk a little bit about the process that we use, so the theoretical framework that informed our work. And this figure kind of illustrates all of the uncertainties we were grappling with and inhibit flood resilience in Vermont more generally. When we take full stock of the circumstances facing Vermont, planning for flood resilience is not just about rebuilding when the next disaster comes, but requires a comprehensive evaluation of the many elements that impact and are impacted by flooding. There are a wide number of driving forces that you can see illustrated here on this slide that can plausibly influence the future of the Deerfield Valley and Vermont as a whole. Through a scenario planning framework, we were able to holistically assess each of these forces and distill them into 3 possible scenarios. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what scenario planning is. Here's a quote that kind of frames it quite well. So we used exploratory scenario planning as our core analytical framework for this studio. Scenario planning is an important framework as it allows us to contend with uncertainty and consider possible futures. It isn't about predicting the future, but instead about grappling with the many drivers that are outside of our control and finding actions that will help us achieve the best possible outcome, regardless of what the future holds. Understanding key driving forces is sort of the first step in the bedrock of scenario planning. And in order to effectively identify those driving forces, we had to really center local knowledge and reflect the community's concern. So that essentially was just a fair amount of community engagement. So using a multi-pronged public engagement process that aimed to meet residents where they were at, our efforts included a survey, on-the-ground fieldwork, tabling, our board game, and stakeholder interviews. We advertised our community survey online at all the events we attended and used it during our on-the-ground fieldwork to connect with residents and get their perspectives in familiar settings. Throughout our presentation today, you have seen and will continue to see some quotes from our 52 respondents and a few quotes from some stakeholder interviews. And then our board game, Ready or Not, the Climate Challenge, was a pretty critical part of our engagement process. And it took many rounds of revisions, which included a pretty amazing game with our friends at Wilmington Works. And we're really excited to present it as a final deliverable. This game, I'm just going to give you a little preview. This game allows participants to conceptualize future uncertainties and explore how regional cooperation can support resiliency. We hope it will serve as a lasting tool that brings people together and sparks creative thinking. We're going to talk about it towards the end, but it is deeply informed by scenario planning. So it really allows anyone to approach that framework and grapple with the future and a lot of uncertainty. So all of this engagement showed great clarity on what mattered most to the residents of the 4 towns and shined a light on the most imminent challenges and opportunities facing each community and the region. So with that engagement and that local knowledge in mind, we were able to develop our scenarios. We refined the scenarios repeatedly, particularly after interviews with municipal leaders and after our mid-semester presentation. Their feedback pushed us to sharpen the narratives, clarify assumptions, and ensure each scenario reflected real tensions and choices that these towns may face. Our scenarios are featured here on this slide, and we gave them titles, and they are Private Paradise, Rural Regression, and Green Growth. I'm going to take a second to describe them to you all and explain sort of how it was worked into the development of our deliverables. Of the driving forces we identified through our engagement, we highlighted 3 forces whose direction, either increasing or decreasing, would have the most distinct impact on the possible futures of Vermont. As indicated on this slide, state and federal regulation, state and federal funding, and demographic shifts were identified as critical forces. And I'm just going to briefly describe and take you through a little narrative of how we imagined these possible futures. So Private Paradise is a future with strict environmental protection, but very limited public funding. Wealthy second homeowners dominate the housing market and economy and culture, pushing long-term residents out. Infrastructure improves unevenly based on private dollars rather than public needs. This creates an environmentally conscious yet socially inequitable landscape. So think of places like Provincetown or Jackson Hole, just very beautiful, but increasingly inequitable. Populations shrink, infrastructure deteriorates, and both funding and workforce capacity decline with no FEMA buyouts or insurance subsidies. Flood recovery becomes slow and fragmented. Communities rely on grassroots actions and low-cost strategies because formal systems can no longer provide what's needed. Oh, sorry, that was rural regression. I messed that up, but that was rural regression. That's the low support, low regulation future. My apologies. And then our last scenario is the one on the far right, and that's green growth. It's our boomtown future. And this is a future where we imagined that towns receive strong government financial support to match proactive regulation for an aggressive green transition in Vermont, leading to both demographic and economic growth. So in this future, we imagine that floodplain areas are expanded, affected homes can receive buyout funds, an influx of outside funding for infrastructure upgrades and repairs, and funding for disaster relief lead to the implementation of flood mitigation strategies and smart growth. This scenario represents a future in which resources, leadership, and community willpower converge to create a resilient and adaptive Deerfield Valley. So using these 3 scenarios, we developed our deliverables and then tested those deliverables if we were to do them across these futures and what sort of result would we get. And that allowed us to see how effective they were. And we were able to prioritize components of those deliverables because we could say with some amount of certainty that if a town were to do it today, regardless of what the future held, it would still have a positive and effective impact. And I'm just going to walk you through briefly what our deliverables look like. And then for the rest of the presentation, we want to just highlight some components that feel very universally accessible. So our deliverables are split into 4 separate reports. They can be found on our website, which we will drop in the chat in a moment so you can explore while listening to us talk about it. And the first one is the Municipal and Regional Capacity Toolkit, and it provides a set of land use policy recommendations to support proactive planning for flooding. I just want to note that this report hasn't been published yet, and there's some tweaks that we're still making to it, and it will be expected later this spring. The next one is our Community Floodproofing Toolkit, which provides residents with resources to prepare and protect themselves, their homes, and communities from flooding. Our Resilient Funding Guide has a consolidated guide of federal and state grants, but given the shifting federal landscape, it also contains a set of resilient financial tools and funding opportunities that will strengthen municipal budgets and help towns invest in a flood-ready future. And lastly, our process-based education materials includes our board game and another engagement activity that we did, which was a mapping activity. And these foster community connection and continued collaboration across communities. We have selected a few components to highlight from each of these, and we think that they proactively address challenges that are experienced by Vermonters. And Seth is just going to jump right into that.
Yep. So returning to the issue of capacity that I discussed earlier, we are developing the municipal and regional capacity toolkit. And as Julia mentioned, we are in the process of getting that published this semester. The toolkit addresses the fact that flood resilience is above all an issue of land use. When we consider all the steps each town could take to live prosperously with water, part of the solution is simple: move out of harm's way. The heart of the toolkit is our land use and policy proposals. These are flexible, incremental actions that are adaptable to the circumstances of varying futures, including changes in financial, regulatory, and demographic trends. Some of the proposals we put forth can be seen on this slide, bulleted at the bottom of the slide, including a list of comprehensive zoning recommendations, a strategic conservation plan, a culvert replacement plan, and an abandonment planning tool, and a regional stormwater utility fee. Land use regulations like zoning, conservation, and stormwater management provide critical levers to guiding communities towards a more flood resilient form. Zoning ordinances must always strike a balance between accommodating present needs and instituting future vision. Our zoning recommendations are organized in tables by town and address distinct challenges and opportunities that are uniquely experienced by each of the 4 communities. It is worth noting, however, we were very conscious of this throughout our project, that while a municipality's zoning regulations end at its borders, its rivers don't. Our zoning recommendations pinpoint definitive opportunities for the 4 towns to build cohesion between their ordinances and work towards a regional vision, such as the map that you see on the left side of your screen. Crosstown zoning will not only advance regional flood mitigation, but it should also expedite solutions to the current housing crisis, promote conservation, and streamline smart infrastructure investments. And speaking of conservation, Southern Vermont's rich natural amenities, as we all know, are a wellspring of pride for these 4 towns and Windham County as a whole and the Windham Regional Commission. A conservation ethic is really deeply ingrained in here, as we learned through our engagement process. And it is the heart of the identity of these communities. While great strides have been made to protect land in these towns, we can't say the same or share a similar success story about the area's rivers. Our recommendations represent a very targeted and strategic integration of conservation efforts with flood resilience plans. And we can't advance flood resilience without addressing stormwater infrastructure. Though often unnoticed, culverts are the workhorse of stormwater infrastructure across Vermont. At a time when money is tight and full replacements are very expensive, replacing just one culvert becomes a massive decision. With our report, we provide straightforward functional tools that towns can use to develop an adaptive prioritization strategy for maintaining, upgrading, and possibly even abandoning culverts in the future. And lastly, in a similar vein to culverts, we need to reassess how stormwater and our stormwater systems are managed. A stormwater utility assessment would create a conversation around the many contributing factors to stormwater, and it would also identify, educate, and incentivize each community to pursue active stormwater mitigation measures. Moving forward, we have put a number of technical tools together that help us answer how to address the vulnerabilities of the built environment to floods. One tool which we have already published and can be found at the link in the chat, we'll post that in the chat momentarily, is the flood risk mapping tool. Yeah, actually, we're going to post that right now.
We're gonna just do it right now. We have 2 computers in front of us. We're switching.
We're toggling.
You do it.
Yeah.
I can't really see it.
Here we go.
Okay, it's in the chat. Thank you for your patience.
So yes, one of the tools that we've already published is our flood risk mapping tool. When we overlay rivers, streams, and tributaries, we are able to understand why these communities continue to experience severe flood impacts. This network of flowing water, combined with the soil types of the region and the elevation profile of these towns, produces a landscape that is extremely vulnerable to climate change and flooding. This landscape impacts infrastructure in the region, contributing to compounded vulnerabilities. As you can see pictured on the slide now, inundation flooding, land subsidence, and fluvial erosion, and more problems than that, forcefully reshape these communities, coming with very high costs for repair and recovery, and really disrupt the social fabric of the region. For long-term residents, it really was once precautious enough, based on what we heard, to avoid the Deerfield River on a rainy day. And now the sheer amount of precipitation that we get during some rainfall events mean the smallest of streams have the potential to do very serious damage. There is a dire need to redefine flood risk in these 4 towns, and the flood risk mapping tool hopefully does exactly that. It aggregates multiple types of flood resilience data in layers on an interactive map. You can see some of those layers on your screen now. It combines and synthesizes critical hydrological data like land cover, soil type, slope, height above nearest drainage, which is a technical term for elevation, and proximity to water and the floodplain. As you can see on the slide now, the flood risk mapping tool is an interactive online map that residents and town leaders can use to identify flood risk down to the parcel level. The tool visualizes a flood risk index score on a 1 to 5 scale for any given parcel of land. I will preface saying that it sometimes takes a minute or two to load on your website just because it is processing a lot of spatial data. So be patient. And while the flood risk mapping tool is already published, one of our bigger goals for this semester, and something that we're very excited about, is to expand on its framework as a decision-making tool. The flood risk mapping tool shows us what lands are vulnerable to flooding, and coincidingly, it also shows us what lands are flood-proof. Using that data in what it's communicating as to the flood vulnerability of land, we're hoping to take that, incorporate other spatial information like zoning, utilities and infrastructure connection, road access, land ownership info, and more, and build that into a development roadmap for the 4 towns. And while these towns equip communities with all of the information needed to make robust investments toward flood resilience, I'm sure you all are wondering, and I was frequently wondering, where does the money come from to pay for all of this? I will now pass the mic off to Julia to discuss this.
Thank you, Seth. So yeah, development and infrastructural investment are really only parts of building resiliency, as the impacts of flooding events become stronger and costlier, and the instability of federal disaster assistance grows. Every dollar available for flood mitigation projects and disaster response becomes more important. Planning for flood resilience requires questioning not just how much, but from where and when funds can be mobilized. Simply put, flexibility and stability of finances are some of the most critical assets in combating uncertainty. We want to highlight 3 components of our resilient funding guide for you this evening: a capital improvement program, or CIP, a stormwater utility fee, and a flood resilience reserve fund. A CIP is a home for all your funding sources, so they can be organized and more easily allocated towards specific projects. Through a CIP, municipalities can assess revenue, inventory asset conditions, evaluate cost, prioritize projects, identify funding sources, and coordinate the implementation of projects through a structured framework. It allows towns to clearly understand their financial capacity so they can make informed decisions about the type and extent of projects to undertake. As Seth discussed earlier, stormwater runoff is one of the primary causes of flooding. Development in Vermont communities, both rural and urban, has led to a significant increase in land area covered by impervious surfaces, which amplifies runoff and flooding. A stormwater utility fee generates targeted funding for stormwater management at the municipal level. We recognize that the tax burden is already pretty overbearing on residents. So in structuring a stormwater utility fee calculation can be targeted at a development that has the highest impact, such as a new or large development. The systems allows property owners to contribute to stormwater management according to their stormwater impact. The revenue generated can only be used for utility-related expenses like upgrading drainage systems, developing stormwater plans, covering administrative costs, and installing flood control measures. And lastly, establishing a municipal reserve fund or a stabilization fund, maybe a rainy day fund, is another practical way for municipalities to hold more agency over their future finances. A reserve fund is an amount of money set aside on an annual basis to fund unexpected expenses or make up for changes in revenue that cannot be supported by the general fund. Considering the uncertainty of federal funding, this is a critical financial resource for municipalities. Increasing funding capacity for towns will always be helpful. It is the first step before any other action. Funding can be a challenging topic to grasp, but it is an essential thing to understand, especially when it comes to building climate resilience. So with unfilled town positions, volunteer planning boards, and limited budgets, each town faces a significantly larger challenge and a reduced return on investment by approaching flood resilience on their own without organized long-term planning. The components we have put forth this evening are made more effective when used regionally. Collaboration can reduce costs per municipality, allow for more versatile strategies, and create a more informed list of priorities. But collaboration starts with conversations, and the challenges and uncertainties outlined in this presentation are not easy topics to address within or even between municipalities. To address this barrier to collaboration, we designed the Ready or Not Climate Challenge to help participants explore the impact of climate change on communities by having players make their own choices regarding development patterns, funding allocation, shared services, and more in towns of their very own. Players see how these choices can influence a town's resilience to various scenarios like flooding, erosion, economic instability, and more. But we also wanted to make sure it was still fun. So there are some pretty fun scenarios thrown in there, from a fifth grade science fair gone wrong to the rising fame of a local moose. There's also some beavers in there as well. A key element of this game is the incorporation of money and trade-offs, which helps players understand the financial dimensions of building resilience. Decisions made every round carry costs and benefits and encourage players to think about actual local financing challenges, pros and cons of shared services and mutual aid agreements. These structures can help illustrate how towns can rely on one another and how resource sharing can strengthen resilience.
Awesome.
I'm going to do the interest form. I'll do it.
Yeah, it's already copied. So, yeah. So we would like you all with that and discussing our game. We'd like to invite you all to play the game with us. We are hoping to play it as many times and as many opportunities as possible throughout the spring. We have put an interest form in the chat, and we'll also email it to you all after this meeting. Through that form, you can just quickly tell us who you are and if you are interested in playing the game with us. And just to close us out, we also invite you all to explore our website. All of our reports, tools, and other deliverables can be found there. We will also throw that link in the chat as well. I know we're throwing a lot of links at you. And on behalf of the UMass Amherst Regional Planning Graduate Studio, we would like to thank you all so much for attending and listening to our presentation. We, of course, would also like to extend our deepest thanks to Chris and the Windham Regional Commission for the invitation to speak with us this evening and work with us on this project. It's been such a wonderful opportunity. Here's our sources. And we felt it very fitting to end this presentation with a quote from Wendell Berry. We hope our work has inspired you all, and we are very excited to work with you all in the future. whether it be pertaining to flood resilience or any planning issue or conversation that you might be experiencing in your town. We really encourage you all to reach out. Please don't hesitate. And with that, we can now shift into Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Hey, if you guys want to stop sharing the screen, it'll make it a little easier to see everybody. And great job on the presentation. Bonnie, do you want to manage the conversation? Do you want to manage the Q&A? You're muted right now.
Thank you both very much. Great job. Great job. I sure want to play that game. So does anybody have any questions for them right now, for Julia and Seth? Raise your hand. All right, Ralph?
Go ahead, Ralph. Yeah.
Good. I have a question, which is, for the number of times that you've played the game, how do things typically work out? Like, what direction does the system go in when people are playing the game typically? Like does it lead to dysfunction, utopia, conflict?
Yeah, I have seen it played every time it's been played for the most part, and it really depends on who's participating, and also because we have a pretty large list of scenarios, it goes either way. I have seen some really interesting conversations come up about cooperation, but I've also watched things kind of fully fall apart, and because some of these things the scenarios will repeat by round, people will face the same challenge that their neighbor had the round before. And it really makes it very clear that sometimes you do just have to lean on your neighbor. But I would not say it's utopia. I think it's typically kind of a struggle, but I think because it feels kind of abstracted, people are able to have fun with that.
Thanks.
I see Kathy has her hand up.
Yeah, so I'm Kathy Bales from Wyndham, and great presentation. I so appreciate the effort and insights. One thing I wondered if you noticed very early on in your presentation, you had a graphic that described town organization. And I think maybe like for a town like Wyndham and many others, it is not quite the pyramid with the town administrator separating everything. I'm like, we don't have a town administrator. And I think there are a lot of other towns that don't. And as I'm getting ready, I'm the treasurer and I'm getting ready for town meeting, which is Tuesday. And we have 1 million people, not 1 million, we have 400 and some people, but who all want every single detail. And so I wanted to challenge you a bit to maybe relook at that org chart and try to say, how are decisions made in a town like ours?
Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Kathy. We actually put that on the slide with the intention of just kind of communicating a very conventional structure that doesn't necessarily fit the mold of these communities in Southern Vermont. When we were engaging with administrators and stakeholders across the 4 towns across last semester, we were hearing time and time again about town administrators wearing many different hats and decision-making having to be decentralized across perhaps some more informal channels in order to get things done and really make things happen. So when we return to that visual that we have on that slide, that is just a wild number of positions that is a pretty far reach for some of the communities that we have in Southern Vermont. So I think which points to us really needing to think creatively of how we can improve capacity in the lack of just sheer manpower in mind.
Yeah, because in many ways, it's like taking the wonderful creative work you did on that mind map
Mm,
and applying the same thinking to how decisions are made at the select board level.
mhm,
Because I don't think that is not how things happen, especially in towns with no administrator. In other words,
mhm.
there isn't that, you have like what would look like the neck of a funnel. But
Yeah.
for most towns like us, we're not a funnel. In fact, there's a great deal of not wanting to be a funnel, not wanting to have everything go through a central source. So when I looked at the mind map you did, I was like, that looks way more like our organizational chart.
Mhm.
Yeah, we appreciate you bringing that up. We put that
Thank you. Thank you.
structure, we put that image up there next to the quote to try and provide contrast between how people think local government looks versus how it actually looks. But so I appreciate that you brought it up.
Rick?
Great job, guys. Rick from Rockingham here. Wondering if you considered flood insurance as an aspect. In our conversations I hear around this issue, the word insurance comes up very, very frequently, and the insurance maps and so on. So I'm just wondering if you gave that any thought.
Yeah, absolutely. We have as part of the community floodproofing toolkit, we have a section on insurance, and we also talk about ERAF funding and what status each town is at. And we definitely thought about it a lot. I think the thing that we came up against, and that map that Seth showed, is that some of the FEMA maps on flooding are being updated. And so the extent to which flooding occurs is not necessarily reflected. But we do have a section on different options for at least residential insurance. And then we also recommended that towns sort of step up their percentage in ERAF so that residents can benefit from some kind of subsidy in pricing. But we just didn't mention it today. But yeah, absolutely.
We also have a section in the municipal and regional capacity toolkit that is to come out later this spring, where we talk about ERAF, as Julia mentioned, and the tiered structure that it kind of operates within, where each town can, if they take on certain flood resilience projects, they can access a higher amount of funding from both the state and also the federal levels through the community rating system. That's a whole nother section in our report. And our main mission with that was just trying to streamline what those initiatives that are kind of folded underneath those two programs umbrellas, and make it very clear how they can achieve, how they can get those tasks done, and also, kind of how it intersects with the rest of the flood resilience initiatives that we put forth in those reports. Because there's one project that, although it is to advance their funding goals through ERAF, it also has a lot of secondary benefits that might not be seen right off the bat, that will really help these towns advance flood resilience. Yeah.
Thank you. And ERAF is what?
So
Emergency Relief Assistance Fund. It's what gets you what it really does is it gets you a reduction if there's a federal disaster declaration than what the local required match is. But if there's no federal disaster declaration, that's a problem. And that's the future we're probably looking at. I just want to say, before we go to Art, I want to say one quick thing about flood insurance. That might actually be a really good topic for the full commission, because I don't think it's well understood. Because, if you have a house that's perched 100 feet above a river, it's not likely to be in the map flood hazard area, which means that your flood insurance can be really cheap. But if the ground washes away and your house falls into the water, then flood insurance is what's going to cover you. Your regular homeowner's insurance is not. And the take rate for flood insurance across Vermont is really low. And if you live on a brook, right, even an unnamed brook, and that thing blows up and runs through your house or by your house, it's flood insurance that's going to help you. So it would probably be good to have a whole conversation for the full commission, and maybe even a public webinar about flood insurance, what it is, what it does, what it doesn't do. Sadly, if you look at rates of people of where just regular home insurance is on decline. Last time I saw it, Vermont was on a decline, and I think it's because Vermonters can't afford regular home insurance now because the replacement costs have exceeded their ability to pay for the insurance to pay for that. And so it's really we've got an affordability crisis with insurance generally.
Yeah, in flood insurance specifically in Vermont is significantly higher in other states just because of the repeated flooding damage over the last several years. So it's definitely challenging. And we talked about it in brief, but it's definitely worth further discussion. Just because the National Flood Insurance program only goes so far. So what are the emerging alternatives in the private market is worth having a discussion about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you for the ERAF. I always forget.
Art, I think you're next.
Yeah, you mentioned in passing about beavers being part of your game. One of the issues that exists here in Vermont, certainly not far from where I am, is beaver dams and the ponding sources in those. And and even in terms of the flood insurance, they're not part of that plan. So you could have flood risk and not be eligible for flood insurance. And I'm in the culvert stuff. I'm imagining you, of course, use the GIS mapping but I know that the culvert stuff wasn't complete. The culvert mapping is not complete. It's not complete right in front of my house.
Okay.
And that's an undersized culvert.
Okay.
Is there? I'm not in the district where you are, where you did your exam, but I imagine it's the same issues over there.
Yeah, Art, the purpose of this, of course, is for towns to think about what they need to be doing. So if Westminster's culverts aren't properly mapped or properly sized, that's an issue really for the town to take up. So that's the goal, is not for the students, right, to figure this out for all the towns, is to provide recommend guidance or best practices for the municipalities to follow.
That is really helpful as we move forward this semester. We're hoping to kind of make some separate and distinct but equally helpful tools similar to the Vermont culverts data this semester that will inform decision making for these towns.
I guess my point is the fact that the importance of culvert mapping, beaver pond, the water, the point sources of water risk, are they part of the recommendations in there?
Yeah, I think it is good to know. And we, in our experience looking at that GIS data, there clearly were less detail on all of the culverts that we found inventoried there. But I think more generally, the recommendation that we try to hone in on throughout all of our reports is that this is a pretty heavy burden for a town itself to do, which would, if the state isn't capable of inventorying and managing or identifying culverts, that it might really require towns to come together and check the conditions of their culverts, coordinate replacements, and coordinate cleaning and management. Regional cooperation and collaboration is like the song of our last semester, just because it is a considerable lift to do that on your own. And clearly, and we heard from a lot of people about beavers. These small environmental, whether it's natural or built, these small things really have a big impact on the way water flows. So it does require a lot of attentiveness. And we want to acknowledge that isn't something that one town can always do alone.
We got the last two, Bonnie, I think, Jim and Pete.
Pete is next, and then Jim.
Was that me you called? I'm sorry, didn't hear you.
Pete, you have a question?
Yeah, so I do. So we recently had a presentation from the Land Use Review Board, what Act 181 stuff. right? That streamlines the permitting for development in tier 1A, tier 1B areas, which are typically rural, like village or rural residential, zones.
Mhm.
And it seems to me that largely those zones are, the areas that have been, had towns and houses in them for many, many years, and were built along streams and brooks, and they're sort of already there, right? So it seems like the Act 181 is streamlining the permitting to build stuff in flood zones.
Mhm.
So, not having reviewed that or looked at it in that kind of detail, I'm just wondering how that shakes out, because that's, right now you have Act 181 trying to develop, these village areas, but many of them I think are in the flood zone.
Guys, that's one I could probably answer. Yeah, so Pete, under Act 181, as part of the mapping of the centers and growth areas and neighborhood areas, you can take into account flood adaptation needs and how to grow up and away from flood hazard areas. And under the Flood Safety Act, where the state's going to take over regulation in the river corridors, their rules are being developed about what infill development would be appropriate. This isn't in the floodplains, that your town's flood hazard bylaws control that. But as far as in the river corridors, where there are fluvial erosion risks, channel migration risks, because we have some towns that are located on alluvial fans and highly erodible areas, the DEC is probably going to get pushed back another year or two. It's supposed to be developing rules that identify areas that are more appropriate for infill development, where you already have existing development, and those that are at higher risk and it really shouldn't be done. So happy to talk to you about that more, but there is latitude within 1A and 1B to look at growing your historic villages and settlements up and away from flood hazards.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And Jim, you have a question?
Actually, a couple of them, and they're mainly associated with the game. I wondered whether or not in the game you took into consideration upstream activities that as a town you don't have control of. And the corresponding one to that is the effects that your plans and your actions have on people downstream of you. Those are both activities that can have significant effect on the town. I just wondered if you kind of rolled the dice on those in your game.
That's a great question. Yeah. We, in the design of the game, there's 4 towns that can be 1 player to each town. And some of the scenarios do kind of include circumstances for the other towns should that one town who's given that scenario act in a certain way. So yeah, kind of the whole theme of doing to those downstream as you wish those upstream do to you is very much incorporated into the game.
Yeah. And one of the things you have to do each round to sort of continue to play is maintain essential services, including water treatment. And there are several scenarios that can impact your freshwater resource. And some of the most interesting collaboration happened around that. I think that's one of the pieces that we gave a pretty accurate price tag to, because it's really expensive in the game and also in real life. And the conversations that happened around that, and that's less like upstream, downstream, but yeah, realizing that an essential and vital resource that we all need as people, that you can extend that to your neighbors. There was a lot of people being really good neighbors when things went wrong with water.
All right, I think that's it, Bonnie.
So we want to thank you so much. What a beautiful job, and I'm really looking forward to digging into all these links that you put up here. And I hope everybody takes a good look at all this stuff. And yeah, we need to talk more about this for sure. Thank you very, very much.
Thank
Yeah,
you
of
all.
course.
We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. And Seth and I are really excited to hopefully meet with you all and really interested in continue doing work in the spring. So please do not hesitate to reach out, and we will share the presentation and all of the links, and our contact info is on there. So truly reach out. We're happy to hear from you all. And thank you, Chris and WRC, for having us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great job, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Bye. Have a great rest of your meeting.
And Camille, hope your kiddo feels better.
Thank you. Bye, Chris. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Okay, that was great. That was great. Might
Good
wanna-
questions, everybody.
Huh?
I said good questions.
Yeah, might want to think about hosting a retreat for planning commissioners to see this presentation. Just an idea.
Bonnie, it looks like we've got a quorum, enough of a quorum to have the vote on the minutes,
Yeah.
even with Gabby gone.
So at this point, I'd like to get a vote on accepting the minutes of last month's full commission. Everybody take a look at them? Would someone like to make that motion?
Ann?
Thank you, Ann. And a second? Rick? Okay, any discussion about the minutes? Anybody see anything that needs to be corrected? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Is that unanimous? Haven't got Ann Waring? How'd it go? Ann? Gretchen?
What? I'm voting in favor.
Okay, and Gretchen, how about you?
And I don't think that I can vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Gretchen, the only thing you can't vote on is the regional plan and town plan approvals.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
Okay. So I can vote on minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, don't let the power go to your
yes.
head.
Was here.
So it's unanimous. Thank you.
One abstention.
One abstention? Okay. Any other abstentions? Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris, you want to give us your executive director's report?
Yeah, so I will try to make this quick. Again, thanks to everybody for making it out tonight. I know there are a lot of people who had pre-town meetings tonight. So first, we, as Gabby noted, on March 17th at 6, we sent out a notice, but we'll be sending it out again at 6:00 p.m. There's going to be a webinar with the Land Use Review Board talking about Tier 3 and the road rule. So that's available to anybody who wants to attend, and we hope that you guys will. We've sent it out to all the towns, town planning commission, select boards, you guys, of course, and feel free to share it with anybody that you like. We have developed an Act 181 frequently asked questions in which we talk about the regional plan, how also Tier 1, Tier 3, the road rule, and other items. So that will be going out. That'll be going out to you guys tomorrow. We're going to be sending it out more broadly early next week. The main reason we're waiting is Ashley is away, and she is the master of getting our what I call our all list. So that'll be going out to everybody. But I'll be sending it out to you guys tomorrow. Stan, did you have a question? Okay. I just saw the hand. That was probably an old hand from a vote.
That could be.
So that'll be going out soon. And along with that, we developed a document. It's actually an updated document that we've been kind of updating from time to time over the last few years called What Can the Region and Towns Really Do About Housing? It's a 2-pager that just kind of simplifies what you can realistically do. And we thought it was important to go out with the Act 181 frequently asked questions because we'll be talking later about basically housing targets that the state set for the region and how that process is going to work with the towns. There've been a lot of questions that towns have been asking, like, does that mean we the town have to build housing? And the answer is no. It's all totally within the town's control. It's just a target. It's really kind of more of a modeling exercise. On March 25th, we are again collaborating with Vermont League of Cities and Towns to host a select board meetup. It is likely going to again be at Newbrook Fire Department from noon to 1:30 like we did last year. The year before we had done it in the Townsend Town office. But we'll be sending information about that out to the select boards. We'll be sending that out right after town meeting day to let folk know about it. On yesterday on Vermont Edition, you may have heard a Brave Little State program on Vermont Public Radio about the history of county government in Vermont. I was discussing on Vermont Edition yesterday where they played that episode. And really what I was talking about is, really the challenges that we see towns facing and the challenges that they face in trying to work together with one another on sharing services, and how there are a lot of state rules and culture and other things make that really hard. So I wasn't talking about, county government. I was talking about the need to make that process easier. So if you want to listen to it, if you go to look up Vermont Public and search for Vermont Edition, you'll see the recording of it there. And related to that, one of the things that's been discussed a lot in the Wyndham Regional Commission back in 2014, 2015, we had a lot of discussions about it, was these things called a tool called a Council of Governments. The Franklin Regional Council of Governments immediately to our south in Massachusetts, they have this framework where basically it's a structure where the highest level elected official in a municipality serves on a council. And the purpose of the council really is to talk about, it's all totally within the town's control. What do we, the town, want to go in with other towns on to do things like, bulk purchasing or shared zoning administrator or shared town administrator or animal control or whatever it might be. The RPCs have been working with the University of Vermont Master of Public Administration capstone class on just basically developing a description about what councils of government are, how they function, so that that information will be available for everyone from the general public to legislators to just understand what that tool is and how it might be used in case the state wants to have a discussion in the future about enabling that structure to exist, because right now statute wouldn't allow it. Also working with UVM, I'm kind of the point person for the RPC, is working with Vermont Emergency Management and the Urban and Community Forestry Program. We're working with a UVM class. It's going to be a multi-semester class developing guidance on how to reuse flood buyout properties. If all the ones eventually go through the hazard mitigation grant program, Vermont's going to have a total of like 400 plus buyout properties, and a lot of them do not have reuse plans. And so it's basically a guide on best practices and ideas about how towns can reuse those properties. And last but not least, this year again, last year we worked with the Conway School for Graduate School for Landscape Design and developing outdoor recreation inventory and analysis. This year they reached out to us saying, hey, can we work with you guys on a project? And so what we're having them work on is a flood adaptation guide specifically geared towards our historic villages. And they're going to be surveying and probably having a webinar or a remote meeting with planning commissions in the region, but basically talking about, hey, when it comes to and Peter, this goes to your point, when you have a historic village that has significant flood or fluvial erosion risk, how are you thinking about the planning? Are you thinking about the planning? Do you know what to think about in terms of how to make it more flood resilient? How to think about maybe how to, make the most of the land you have that is at minimal flood risk, or how to kind of grow that village up and away. And so the students are developing a guide, and the goal is to actually make it interesting, not just some rote technical guide, but we're even talking about possibly almost like a graphic novel approach about how you would approach that. And they're using the villages of Newfane, Warsboro, and Grafton as kind of their laboratories to kind of explore concepts for themselves as a student, but also to kind of point to, like, here are some examples about what you might do in these community might do in your town based on examples we saw here. So this past weekend I went with them. They went up to Warsboro last weekend or weekend before last, and this weekend I was with them out in Newfane and Grafton. But they're working directly with those planning commissions. Before too long, they're going to be developing it's going to be a very simple survey, not very time consuming. They're going to be sending that out to the planning commissions in the region. And that's it. Any questions for me? All right.
Okay, I guess we're almost wrapped up. Now it's time reserved for public comment.
But you might want to see if Jim Pinkerton has anything to say about project review.
Jim, do you have anything to say about project review?
Yeah, we actually had a meeting. It was a rare thing in 2025. We discussed a couple of areas of interest. A tower in Dummerston to increase the range that your cell phone works at. Any of you that have ever ridden up Route 30, your phone goes dead somewhere around Newfane and doesn't come back for quite a while. It's going to cover most of that area, and it's got the town's really in favor of it. The regional, we found that there wasn't regional significance, but we really wanted to wait and see more on the development side of that before we made a decision. The other one was an interesting thing where Wyndham Foundation is working on increasing the number of events that they have from 3 to 24. And where we found that didn't have regional significance, we also found that there's potential for all kinds of stuff going on there. 3 events versus 24 can result in traffic problems and a bunch of associated problems with the increase of flow through the town and the adjoining towns. Public Utilities Commission is asks for them to expand on their study, including a traffic study and stuff that we suggested during our meeting. And that was about it. Interesting meeting, by the way. Minutes are available out there on the website.
I'm sorry, Jim. I thought since Alyssa wasn't here, we wouldn't have that. I'm sorry. But thank you. So is there any public comment or anything else anybody would like to bring up tonight? Okay. If that's it, I'll be interested in a motion to adjourn.
I think I saw Rick.
Rick, I have a second?
Yep.
No, Stanley?
All right, thank you all very much. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm not
Thanks, y'all.
in leading the meeting, but we did all right.
Thanks for chairing, Bonnie.
Okay. Good
Bye,
night.
everybody. Bye.